if a billionaire tells you his boat is going to lift you with his tide, what do you think's going to happen?
Yeah, I got balls, close I ribs. I got balls, won't you listen to me?
Hello, 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 and welcome to The Author Has Thoughts. I am the author in question, Gary Ballard, author of 14 self-published novels and novellas, including 6 in a cyberpunk near-future noir series called The Bridge Chronicles, which also has a short story collection called Tales from the Bridge Chronicles Volume 1, and a standalone novel that was just released called Hiss Whistle Dead. I have also written a modern-day reimagining of the Cthulhu mythos called The Stepping Stone Cycle. Now, there's going to be links in the description below for where to buy all my books and all that, so go ahead and go buy my books, read them, and then you can come back and watch the video. If you want to know more about me or about my channel, there's going to be a link to a video up here that kind of reintroduces the channel and introduces the other one that'll introduce the new book and so on and so forth. But with that said, let's get to my thoughts. You'll forgive my indulgence of going back to my childhood for a minute. I remember I was age like 8 or 9, and I was watching an address from the Oval Office by President Ronald Reagan. It's one of those speeches presidents make when they are trying to get a particularly thorny piece of legislation through Congress and need to try to exert some public pressure on the legislatures. This particular speech was accompanied with charts and was centered on the economy, specifically trying to drag the U.S. economy out of the inflation and recession of the Carter administration. Now, to my knowledge, it was the first speech discussing this new concept of taxation, labeled as trickle-down economics. Again, I was a kid, so I'm not going to say that that all my memories are entirely accurate about this. You'll forgive me if I get some of the details wrong, but it wasn't really that new a concept. The Laffer curve, which it was based on, had been around since the Ford administration and had been championed by numerous conservative politicians. Basic concept was that as government spending increases, it requires more onerous taxes being placed on businesses, stifling innovation and job growth. The Laffer curve was a theory supposedly presented to politicians on a napkin by economist Arthur Laffer. I don't pretend to understand the theories, but the distilled idea that the politicians seize on is that decreasing taxes, especially on those wealthy people, while it will initially decrease government revenues, at a certain point on this curve, the extra money in the pockets of citizens and businesses will result in more investments in the economy and more spending. And so at some point, the lost revenue will be made up by the increased economic activity. Again, that is a serious simplification. You can look around and Google it to get more detailed stuff, but that's the gist of what politicians like Reagan have been saying about tax cut policies since I was a kid, very, very long time ago. The phrase that often sticks out about this type of policy is a rising tide raises all ships, or boats, or whatever. It's a very prosaic phase meant to evoke a kind of camaraderie between both rich and poor, middle class and upwardly mobile. Sounds perfect, right? It is used to imply that if we just make the economy stronger, put more money into the system through investment, putting more money into the hands of regular Americans, everyone does better. So if we give huge tax breaks to millionaires and billionaires, they will, in theory, invest in more of their businesses, which will mean more jobs, which will mean more consumer spending, which makes for more tax revenues. Everybody wins, right? Right? Now, if you've paid attention for as long as I have, you'll know that it's a horseshit phrase. Even Ronald Reagan had to give up the ghost on this idea after a minute. A lot of his initial tax cuts had to be rolled back when they didn't do shit to help the economy while still decreasing government revenues. And yet, despite all the evidence to the contrary, these tax cut first and only policies have persisted. The conservative movement taking it as an article of faith that tax cuts, even if they focused almost completely on the wealthy, will make for a stronger economy. Even the Democratic Party has kind of internalized that message, that rising tide that raises everyone, at times taking it as an obvious reality that if Wall Street is doing okay, Main Street will do better as well. How Wall Street's billionaires and millionaires are doing is the leading indicator for how the economy is doing as a whole. despite the fact that it's been clear since at least 2008 that Wall Street and the stock market's principles are completely divorced from reality. How else could you explain a company like Tesla, which only makes a profit when it can sell carbon credits it's not really worthy to claim, still have a market value in the billions as its sales absolutely crater thanks to its rich Nepo baby owner going mask off full Nazi? I think it's in that phrase we can really understand what kind of mentality we're dealing with, especially with the tech bros. A rising tide lifts all boats, implying that the economy will be great for all the more money we pump into it. There's such an understated whiff of hubris in it, though, if you really think about it. The rising tide will lift everyone. Give us, the billionaires, more money or take less from us in the form of taxes, and we lords of business will create the perfect storm of conditions that will shower you all with prosperity. We will control the very economic weather as if gods. The more you think about how our billionaire oligarchs act these days, the more that makes sense. Building rocket ships just to tool up to low orbit simply to say they can, and allow other rich people to do the same for a price. Never mind that the cost of one of those rocket trips could feed a family for a few years, or provide housing for multiple unhoused people, or provide health care for sick people. Don't think about starving people down here on Earth when you could be putting billions into a Mars colony that we don't even remotely have the technology to consider in my lifetime for sure. Let's spend billions building data centers to run random word generating software that will employ less people than a grocery store when all is said and done, and which is likely to cause a bunch of tech workers to lose their jobs when they get automated out of employment by this very software, or at least that's the plan. This software won't do the job nearly as accurately as the person they replace, but they can do so much more of it. What's the 2 to 3% error rate when productivity is exponentially greater? The tide has never been meant to rise. That's the bullshit magic trick. Rather than raise the tide, it's more like the rich people's boats are all powered by water, and by extracting more of that water their way, their boats go faster, can withstand the weather better, and by the time we all realize there's no water left in the ocean, they fucked off, leaving not a rising tide, but a stranded fleet of refugees starving and begging for scraps. Is there a point at which taxation becomes too onerous that it stifles the economy? Sure, certainly. Proponents of wealth taxes will often point to the 50s and its 90% marginal tax rate. I will say that the post-war American economy was an aberration, fueled in part by America being one of the few countries on Earth whose manufacturing and economic activity was not in a rebuilding phase because of wartime devastation. So that high of a tax rate certainly isn't something I'd advocate for, but I do point out that there are plenty of very rich people who survived that time period of excessive taxation with plenty of wealth. In my lifetime, there has been no administration that has taxed wealth at a level even remotely punitive, nor has the tax rate been even a minor factor in the success or failure of the economy. Wealth, despite how we apparently worship it, does not impart godlike status on the wealthy. Doesn't make them smarter than the rest of us, nor better able to decide how to grow an economy, and it too often insulates the wealthy from the consequences of failure, and especially of empathy for their fellow man. They aren't gods choosing to shower us with economic prosperity if we weaken our government with lower tax revenues. They're just assholes with money, most of whom either fell ass backwards into wealth, were born into that wealth, or happened to get super lucky at the right time with the right idea. Don't let them fool you with this rising tide bullshit. Well, thank you for watching, and I hope this has been illuminating or at least entertaining. If you haven't already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and that notification bell to be notified for when I'm putting new videos out. If you liked it, give it a like. If you hated it, give it a dislike. If you want to rip me a new one, drop a comment down below. You can find links to all of my books in the description below. Especially read Hiss Whistle Dead, which is my newest book that just came out in December. I am currently working with a producer to make a audiobook version of this on Audible. So you'll want to check that out when you when you get to it. Check me out on my socials. I've got Blue Sky and Instagram are the ones I'm most active on. Of course, there's also the YouTube channel itself. Thank you for watching. I appreciate that you're here and listening to me rant on. My name is Gary Ballard, and these have been my thoughts.
1, 2, 3, 4.